Yeah, so it's a pleasure to introduce Larice Crow, who's come from Milan, Italy, and he's a friend from the Zig Software Foundation. Larice is the VP of Community for Zig, or for the Zig Lang communities, which is an interesting Zig philosophy. Yeah, we've sort of been friends since 2020. Larice has given a lot of advice into Tiger Beetle, how to think of things, even how to market. So the saying making is showbiz, which I think DuckDB will understand. Taking something on the road, taking it on tour, and yeah, lots of great advice. So and basically we told Larice we're going to be so close, and why don't you come over? So he's like, sure. I booked a flight, and also, yeah, why don't you talk about Zig and some of the thought leadership that you actually really do. So thanks for coming over. Yeah.
Thank you, Yoram. Okay, hello everybody. So yeah, the title was supposed to be like something about software you can love. I'll get to that, but in the meantime, I thought a much better title, and I didn't want to miss on the opportunity. And just so that we are all on the same page, the joke here, like the wordplay, is that rocking the boat is an expression that means like doing something or saying something that might upset people. So, for example, and it's usually used in negative, like you don't want to rock the boat. Like you just started a new job, you don't want to rock the boat. But what if you do? What if you do want to rock the boat? And the idea is not just to be annoying, but also rocking the boat as a rock star. So this is what I'm going to talk about, rocking the open source boat. So as Yoran said, my name is Larice Crow. I work at the Zig Software Foundation. My title is VP of Community. The title is mostly that so that when I talk with like companies, they see VP in the signature and they rest easy. That's mostly it. Here you can find my social media stuff. I run a YouTube channel, and there's also another website, softwareyoucan.love, which I'm gonna get to later on in the presentation. So what I'm gonna tell you about today is 3 ways in which Zig is rocking the open source boat. So I was counting on King to give an introduction about Zig from a technical perspective. I'm not going to talk about technical stuff much, just a little bit, but I want to focus on everything else, because the reality is that a technical project is not just even a programming language, it's not just the technical features. There's a lot more going on that at the end of the day determines the quality of everything, the quality of the ecosystem, what's going to happen a few years in the future, etc. So this is critical stuff that you need to get right. Otherwise, you get bad stuff. So, first way in which Zig is rocking the open source boat. Some people say that you have to be affiliated to a big tech company to make a successful programming language, right? Think about successful programming languages that everybody uses. There's always a big tech company behind it. Fine. With the Zig Software Foundation, so just brief history of the Zig Software Foundation. The creator of the Zig programming language, Andrew Kelly, used to work at OkCupid, started working on Zig on his free time. Then at some point he got enough interest in donations that he could leave the job. That's when he founded the Zig Software Foundation, and also when I joined. The Zig Software Foundation is a 501c3 US nonprofit. If you're used to semantic versioning, that 3, which kinda, roughly speaking, occupies the patch level part, it's actually pretty important. I'll get to that in a moment. So I used to work at Redis Labs. Guess what? Database company, huh? It's a small world. And I joined as VP of Community. And now we have 4 people working full-time, a bunch more, like about a dozen core contributors who can bill hours to the Zig Software Foundation. And there's some stuff at the bottom, like we leave off donations, so that's we get roughly $22,000 a month, 24,000 GitHub stars, blah blah blah. Another thing that might interest you is that Uber is using Zig in production, not as a programming language much, but mostly as a build system. They do use Zig as a programming language a little bit because Zig has its own compiler RT, which is part of why we can do cross compilation. That's written in Zig. Maybe they know, maybe they don't know. It's fine. Either way. But yeah, they mostly use it as a build system so that they can get cross compilation and hermetic builds. And cross compilation is also kind of important because one interesting aspect for them when it comes to cross compilation is that the reason why they cared about cross compilation and ARM is because they wanted to be in a better negotiation position with the clouds when it came to buying compute power, because they don't go on the AWS web panel and just make a new EC2 instance. They pre-purchase this stuff in bulk, and for them, being able to go to AWS and say, well, how much are you gonna make me pay for x86? And they tell you a price, and they can say, well, you know what though, I can also deploy on ARM, and they're making me pay less, so what are you gonna do? So that was one of the main reasons for them to explore ARM64, but that requires cross compilation. One last point about Zig itself is that this idea of maintaining it with Zig, which is kind of working in the sense that today, even if you don't care much about Zig, you know that it's used as a C cross-compiler, C++ cross-compiler, build system, etc. So this is something that people are starting to rely upon. As the language itself is still very unstable. We just changed for loop syntax a few months ago, so understandably companies want to take more easy. It's fine, but this is also working out. And we also have interesting projects that are growing in the Zig ecosystem. I'm going to mention three, which I think are the three biggest heavy hitters / potential killer applications of the Zig ecosystem. Okay, first one, Tiger Beetle, fine. But I'm going to mention Tiger Beetle later on again. This is interesting, but also from a adoption of Zig perspective, I think these last two projects are also even more interesting. So Mach is a game engine. Think of something like Godot written in Zig, and the core point is cross-compilation. Also when it comes to shaders, I don't know if people here care about this stuff, ever done any game programming, but like if you want to make a if you want to make a video game, like a complex enough video game, you need to write shaders. And writing shaders sucks because it looks like C++. But more importantly, you have to write, like, if you want Linux, Mac, and Windows, that's like 3 different sets of shaders, 3 different languages that you have to write. They all look like C++, but they're all bad in different ways. And that's annoying. What Mac does, so not only it inherits all the cross-compilation capabilities of Zig, but it also targets WebGPU, which, if you're not familiar, is like one shader language that the GPU drivers can cross-compile internally for their own specific architecture. So now you have to write one set of shaders, and you're good to go. And so that stuff is good. That stuff does make a difference when it comes to people's ability to make games. Another very interesting project is MicroZig. That's like a hardware abstraction layer library for embedded devices. So you want to program, Raspberry Pi stuff, Arduino, that kind of thing. You can use MicroZig, and you specify the type of board that you have, and boom, you have like already a pre-prepared type that represents your microcontroller with all the pins set correctly, labeled correctly, etc., etc. So that one is also making developing on embedded devices more easy. And if you think about it, embedded devices, that's yet another application of cross-compilation, because you are cross-compiling for the target device. Who here has a custom keyboard with like Q and K on it? Something similar?
Sorry, we're not cool like
Oh
that.
my god. Okay. Well, I was hoping that somebody would raise their hand. But if you do have one of those, man, the toolchain for building a new copy of your firmware, just to change keybinds, it's a mess. It's a real mess. So we're looking forward also to improving on that aspect. In any case, I would say these are like the 3 main. Watch out for these projects. I think they're going to be interesting in the future. Okay, Zig Software Foundation. So, talking about rocking the open source boat. No board seats to big tech companies. We are kind of aggressive about this, in the sense that the standard ZSF offer is how much money you want in exchange for 0 board seats, 0% of the company, but in the end you do get Zig. So we haven't been taken up on this offer yet, but I think we will at some point. It's an actual 501c3 nonprofit, not a 501c6 trade association. You will be surprised that a lot of nonprofit foundations related to programming languages are not C3s, they are C6s. And the difference is that a C6 has to pay taxes, it's not tax-free, but they can do lobbying. So they choose, or rather, it's not necessarily true that one chooses it for this specific reason, but sometimes these companies choose to pay taxes so that they can do lobbying, which is weird. But it does happen, and these are like and then you have talks with people saying, well, if you want to participate in open source, it's tough because these open source organizations ask to be a member, you have to pay a big ticket price, so only big tech. No, it doesn't have to be like this. What the fuck are you talking about? People who made these things chose for them to work this way. At the Zig Software Foundation, you can donate money. We don't pay taxes over that, and the money goes to paying developers. So we want to stay small. We want to maintain small organizational overhead. We don't want to become a ginormous company that then at some point makes no sense, doesn't know how to do anything, and like all the energy, all the money gets wasted keeping it alive. And we pay our contributors. Like we do pay our contributors, which is, I think, you would expect this to be obvious. It's not obvious for some reason. And we also do work actively to try and keep a balance between individual and company donors. We don't want to get ourselves in a situation where there's like one big company which doesn't own anything, but by de facto, by being, the one source of 90% of your income, they still kind of own you at that point. So we do actively work to prevent that from happening. And finally, the final goal of the Zig Software Foundation is to foster an ecosystem of independent community-driven initiatives, some of which I presented earlier. Now, how is this working out? I don't know, it's work in progress, right? Zig is something, you can find it on Hacker News, it's kind of interesting, you have interesting projects being born from Zig, like the Beetle. We're not a mainstream programming language yet, you will not find a Zig programming job easily yet, although it's apparently the most well-paid programming language according to Stack Overflow. In any case. That said, I'll leave you with one last data point that might interest you. Just a proxy, nothing concrete, but nothing final, but this is the GitHub start history of Zig and Rust aligned in timeline. So we are younger than Rust. We like comparing ourselves to Rust because Rust is pretty good. And like, I don't think there's any other programming language that it would make sense for us to compare us to Rust. So we are younger than Rust, and we just surpassed them in the sense that we are now a little bit more popular than they were at our age. So is this a guarantee that it's going to continue that way? No. Is this our GitHub stars something that you can pay developers with? No, neither, but still, it's something. So maybe, just maybe, you can make a successful programming language without having a big tech company own you. Maybe. Okay, another way in which we are rocking the open source boat. You can't be competitive without LLVM, and you will never be able to replace LLVM. This one was recent, and I don't know if the people here do read Hacker News. This one got a lot of people kind of mad. I'll give you a little bit of context. This is the one technical thing that I'm going to cover in this presentation. Zig uses LLVM like every other programming language, but we started since a few years ago some work to get rid of LLVM, at least for debug builds, so that we can control the entire code gen pipeline with the ultimate goal, and we also control linking, we have our own linker. The ultimate goal is to have instant incremental rebuilds of your project. Doesn't matter how big it is, if you change just one function, only that function gets recompiled, and we don't even relink the entire executable, which is something that every other language does. Instead, the idea is to basically have code gen set up in a way so that you can patch a new implementation of that function in your final executable. And that means getting rid of LLVM for debug builds. We'll be working towards that, we're almost done. But the idea is to get rid of LLVM eventually more completely, also for optimized builds. Now, this is obviously not something easy, not something you can do today or tomorrow, it's going to take time, and it's not like you have to get rid of LLVM before you can start working on an alternative. You can start working on an alternative while still keeping LLVM around, but at some point, if the alternative does become compelling enough, then you can get rid of LLVM and a lot of problems that come from LLVM. I'm not going to go through them. You can find out this issue 16.270. There's going to be, you will see the reasoning. And one point that I want, and Andrew points out a few trade-offs that come from attempting this issue, and I like attempting this change. But there's one point that I want to point out, which I think is interesting, which is we can implement our own optimization passes that push the state of the art of computing forward. That is not easy, right? But there's one guaranteed way to make that never happen, and it is never trying, right? And in practice, if you think about it, of course, it's not easy to replace LLVM, but what if you make another ecosystem where people who do work on this stuff can contribute, who already contribute to LLVM, can also maybe contribute to your thing. Maybe they enjoy it more. Maybe you can steal their contributors. So it's not like it's impossible if you really put your mind to it. Last point, database freedom. I took this picture at AWS reInvent. I have very strong feelings about that metal pin. I still have it. I love it. Maybe it's not the right word, but I feel strongly about it. So this time I didn't choose a picture. I chose this one because the last way in which we are like rocking the open source boat with Zig is that so Zig is MIT licensed, super open source, but we don't think we have a nuanced view when it comes to what open source is. And we don't take open source as this good thing, thoroughly good thing where let's all shake hands. Oh, you know what? Microsoft loves open source. Microsoft loves Linux. We don't trust this stuff. So I'm gonna come back to open source in a moment, but let me just show you one thing. Okay, this is Twitter. Oh, this is X. This freaking app really needs me to enable notifications, which I am never going to do. But I cannot say no. Fuck off. I have to say not now. And it keeps asking, and it keeps asking. This is an infuriating thing in software lately, an infuriating trend. I'm guessing I'm not the only one who has seen this, right? Oh, now unlocked. Oh, you're eligible. New drop, new loot box. You're eligible for a free upgrade to Windows 11. Wow. But what if I want to stay on Windows 10? Oh, it's down here next to learn more. Can you say no to this? No, you can only say got it or schedule it. It's like it's another not now thing. Man, proprietary software really sucks, right? Open source software is not like this. Open source software is good, right? Especially free and open source software, right? Guess what? This is Mozilla, who apparently has a NordVPN service. And setting aside the fact that there was this hilarious blunt from them where they started showing this pop-up at wrong times, like aggressively, it was a bug. But then, not now! God damn it. So this is not only open source, as I said, right? This is Firefox, right? This is Mozilla. They were supposed to bring balance to the force. So I don't know what free and open source software meant in the past. Today, it's certainly a nuanced topic that is not as good as big tech wants to convince us it is. So the last point is that we have a conference, it's not just a Zig conference, but it is de facto today the one Zig conference, and we call it Software You Can Love. And Software You Can Love is an idea, it's an expression that I coined specifically not to say open source, because we keep associating open source with these, oh, good collaboration ideas, but then when the game gets tough, no, it's just a set of licenses, right? And I mean, you all know in the database space, this is also an interesting source of contention. So I'll just briefly redo two passages. For some of us, creating software is an intimate act. We care deeply about the experience that results from our work, just like a painter or musician takes pride in their art. Unfortunately, a lot of software out there is not software you can love. Many of us are forced to write user-hostile software at work, and elegant solutions are often discarded in pursuit of an extravagant business model. As software you can love, we also want to learn how to protect ourselves from dark patterns, both as software engineers and users. So this is what we talk about at our conferences. If we're talking about open source, we're not talking about open source in the same way you will hear at other conferences, probably. If you're interested more into this, I wrote Playing the Open Source Game. It's an interesting blog post about Zig's perspective with regards to open source. That said, I'm not a whole open source hater. There are good parts of open source. Sometimes yanking the license out of your contributors, maybe you shouldn't do that. But it depends on the situation. And I think that sometimes people are playing a trick on us when they want to, when they paint these things as thoroughly negative. Oh my God, you're not a good open source citizens like us, AWS. That's the end. Thank you. I don't know. Complaints?
I have a complaint. No, I don't. Actually, thank you for your presentation. So I don't know exactly how Zig does this, but we have sort of differentiation between open source and open governance because we see a lot of the open governance data management systems projects to be absolutely horrifying, or having gotten absolutely horrifying over the years because they couldn't say no to people.
Yeah.
What's your take on saying no to people?
So maybe this answer is not super satisfying when you compare like programming languages with databases. Databases are problematic because there's a lot of value in databases and everybody is salivating. When there's a new database, everybody's salivating looking at it, especially the clouds. Programming languages, not so much. When it comes to programming languages, I think you hit the nail on the head, and like you need to be in a position where you can say no to people. Thankfully for us, and I think it all boils down to your financial strategy, right? If you get the financial strategy right, you have the opportunity of saying arbitrarily to an arbitrary number of people no. For example, thankfully, we keep our community engaged enough and invested in our endeavor that whenever somebody says, "Oh, I want to give you money to put my crypto thing on your website," because we do put people's logos and links on our website. Will you do it? The answer is, I'm not even going to reply to their email. Silence. And report the spam. And the same is with other situations, right? Including also corporate sponsorships. So to me, it all boils down to your financial strategy. Like if you take VC money, you kind of lost the game already, in my opinion. Depending on what you're doing. Like it's with a programming language. Let me just put it. We're not because the reality is that you need a business model that can support whatever you're trying to do with a venture capital. And a programming language does not have a business model that makes sense, that is able to fulfill what the expectations of a venture capital. So, yeah. A database might, depends. But I like it that you guys don't have VC money.
Thank you. Are you invested in any database companies?
I matured some options from Redis Labs. I never exercised them. I was so mad at Redis Labs that I angrily refused to exercise my options. I am an advisor to Tiger Beetle. These are my affiliations.
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
That's curious to me because what metric? I don't know. Programming language is complex, even more complex than open source. The database that you don't know who is using it and what for.
Yeah.
How do you decide? What are the metrics I don't know. The team get together and say we did good. I don't know. What is?
We did good with regards to what specifically? To what type of decision?
I don't know. To adoption of Zig, or how do you look whether things are going somewhere, or what's the? Because I guess you can do post on Hacker News, but it's hard to translate that to actual users, or I'm not sure. How do you approach this?
I think for us the three main things are one, money. We need money to survive, and we need to keep donations flowing in. We do have a support contract. Uber is paying us for the ARM stuff that I showed earlier. We do have companies sponsoring the Zig Software Foundation, so that's one. And we try, as I said, to keep that a mix of individual donors, a mix of organizations, etc. Then another metric that we use is size of the community, and you can gauge that by it's not that hard to have a finger on the pulse of the Zig community. Like join the Discord server, join the IRC channel and look at the activity there, and you can see that pick up over time and how the flow of people goes. And it's been steadily increasing, thankfully. And I think point number 3 is there anything interesting happening in your space? And Tiger Beetle is something interesting. The other 2 projects that I showed you is something interesting. So I would say these are the 3 main things that I look at.
So from the size that you have, I'm assuming you have an established community around the project, but you said you had like 4 full-time contributors now, and then you have some companies that donate money, probably. So that might, you also want to maybe look at their issues or not, I don't know. But how do you?
No, we don't.
No, okay. I don't know, but how do you manage that input from all the channels with 4 people? Like, what would be a tip? That that's a fair question. Like, how do you know which issue should be next? Or
the answer is that these companies don't factor in the decision making at all.
And the community?
Neither.
Okay.
Zig is a BDFL run project. So we have the curator, Andrew Kelly, is the BDFL. He decides the roadmap. He's not making the decisions. He's not doing all the decision making alone in at the top of a tower in full isolation. There are other people, core contributors, and other people who do participate more actively in the decision making, and proposals are posted publicly, so you can participate in the discussion. But for example, if there's a proposal and that proposal has a ton of thumbs up on GitHub, that counts 0 with regards to whether that makes into the language or not.
And how do you go through all these proposals to find the ones that might be interesting to you and do the programming and all that stuff?
Hard work.
Okay.
Hard work. Yeah. If you want one recommendation, we're gonna have a new Zig release soon, and if you look at the release notes, every time there's a new release,
The screen is not.
I'm getting there. Okay, just the mirror.
Sorry.
And you know what? Let's go full screen. So if you look at the release notes, like this is 0.10. Every single release note, Andrew and other people helping, they go through every single commit from the previous release, and every single commit gets tucked into the corresponding section. I highly recommend you check the release notes out. You will see the insane amount of work that's happening around Zig. That's why it's also a very that's why companies also don't want to adopt the language much, because we're going at an insane speed of development right now. So the standard library keeps changing, the language keeps changing for the better, hopefully. But like, just look at this, and
that is actually why we wanted to adopt Zig now, because the velocity is so fast. So if we needed like memory prefetch as a built-in, we could do the PR and get it merged like in 48 hours.
That is a good way for influencing the Zig project. Make a good PR. It's gonna get merged fast.
As long as you don't have too many good PRs that you have to look through.
Oh, we have a ton of PRs that we have to go through.
But it's like 4 paid contributors, but there's a lot more active contributors.
Yeah, the core team is 4 people plus 12-ish people, but the total number of contributors that it was on the previous slide is 700 right now.
And how many people can? I'm sorry. Sorry. How many people merge onto master?
Those 12. Although King says he doesn't do that much.
I could. I just Tiger Beetle. That's my
Yeah.
12 people.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
But I'll say just one last thing about PRs. Bad PRs are also good sometimes, because one thing that is, in my opinion, so I wasn't born into Zig, and when I was still at Redis Labs, and Redis has extensions, and I had to show people how to write extensions for Redis, and C it's not the best, doesn't give you the best experience when it comes to writing extensions for a database, especially when people don't have low-level programming experience. So I was looking for something that would help me communicate it better, and I found, well, Rust was definitely an interesting option, but I found also Zig. And when I found Zig, from a technical perspective, I found like it clicked. Like for me, comp time, I love metaprogramming, which is why I hate macros. And for me, comp time is immediately clicked. So I was super interested from a technical perspective, but that wasn't enough. After that, I looked at the issues on GitHub, and I started watching how Andrew and other co-contributors would interact with the community. And the actual thing that really sealed the deal for me was seeing how they were really good at interacting with the community, which in part means also that when you get a not so good PR, you have to decide whether you want to invest time into interacting with the contributor, or rather, well, with whoever opened the PR, to see if you can teach them how to do things and how to become a better contributor. Sometimes it doesn't work, but sometimes it does. And for example, I was used to the open source governance of Redis, and with all due respect to Anti-Rez, who's an awesome programmer, I feel like Redis would have had a much, much happier history had it been a better open source project from the perspective of interacting with contributors and the wider community. Zig got that right incredibly well, and which is why I decided to jump ship and give up my Silicon Valley salary and join the Zig Software Foundation.